shitcoin.com show. The guys sit down with guests to chit chat about crypto. It's time for the shitcoin.com show. Let's all not get tracked.
Welcome back to the shitcoin.com show, everyone. This week, we've got someone who's very involved in a lot of different aspects of the crypto space. We've got the CEO of Atlantic Financial Blockchain Labs, Bruce Fenton. Welcome, Bruce.
Thanks a lot for having me. Good to see you.
So I know as well, we actually just had Marshall Long on the show, who Andreas met at the Roundtable.
Yeah, great guy.
Yeah, so you actually organized the Roundtable, so you've actually got that on the go too. How was it this year?
It was great. It's in its sixth year now, and so the industry has just changed radically. It's one of the older events now, and certainly one of the best attended and best known events. And so it was great. I mean, a lot of people like Marshall have come every year, pretty much. There's a lot of people who've been in the space since 2011, even 2010. Kind of really active people. Pretty much, whoever you might see on I don't really like who's who lists and that kind of thing, but a lot of good people come, a lot of influential people, good developers, certainly a lot of CEOs and investors and OGs. So I think it's great. It's a really great event.
And I guess something that puts it apart is where most conferences, it's just like everybody has a booth and they're shilling some project, like often ICOs. So you never really get real conversations at, say, consensus, because like everybody's just trying to sell you something. But the policy at Roundtable is pretty different for that.
Yeah, we have a no pitch policy, and that's hard to enforce. I mean, we're not super strict about it, but it just sort of sets the tone a little bit so that pitches are going to be a lot more kind of solicited, sort of quiet, like, hey, can you please tell me about your business? Let's go over here and grab a coffee kind of thing, rather than somebody coming up and saying, I'm telling you about my thing. And also the size it's sort of an introvert's conference. The size is a lot smaller than your average conference, certainly much smaller than something like Consensus. So it's more like being in the speaker room or the green room at a Consensus or something, just sort of a small group of targeted people. So we tend to have pretty good, side discussions. And there's also a lot of really healthy breakaways. One thing that I've been happiest with in the last couple years was, I've always been kind of, big tent. I like everybody in the space pretty much. And I like all kinds of different projects. So I love to see when you have like super diehard Bitcoin maximalists break into one group, and then you have Ethereum people over here, and people that you wouldn't even see at the same event. They're having like their own mini events within an event, and then they'll break off. So I really like that about it. The side discussions is wonderful, and that's something you can do with a small crowd. We keep it to a couple hundred people basically, which is pretty small.
And obviously, following the Roundtable, I guess things kind of escalated with this whole COVID-19 situation. In terms of that, and I know that you were definitely pretty vocal about it back in February, I think even, or maybe even earlier. What makes Bitcoiners so good at kind of anticipating these events? Is there something kind of a running theme?
There may be. I think there's some common personality trait. I can speak for myself and a couple of the other people that I know well who predicted it early, and we're kind of similar. Ryan Selkis and I were about the same day, and we were both a little bit influenced by Balaji, who was like a couple days earlier. So in that January period, and I think that all three of us have experience with sort of data and markets and understanding exponential growth and risk and how things scale and that kind of thing. I think thinking outside the box, in my case, there was a lot of different things that made me think of this. I had been a sort of a prepper for a long time. I had investment clients, who have sometimes millions of dollars, and I never could understand. I said, if you have I mean, I've dealt with very, very wealthy clients in some cases, but even people with 10 million, which is still very wealthy, but certainly, I've dealt with people who are deca billionaires. And I'm kind of like, how can you not spend just a little bit to prepare? When you have that much money, it's kind of like having a fire alarm. So I had been thinking about these kind of things, and global pandemic was high on the list. I used to also work a lot with the Gates Foundation and all these speeches that are now famous of Bill talking about global pandemic 5 years ago. I was working with them at that time. So I heard those speeches, sometimes in person. I heard him talking about it when I did a little bit of work for the foundation. So that was definitely on my radar. I had met a lot of people who dealt with Ebola and things like that. And then, the Bitcoin part of it is, understanding exponential growth and understanding how the world changes and how things can have impact. So there's a lot of things I'm not good at. That's one thing I've always been really good at, especially over the last even 20 years, really, of kind of predicting the future, whether it's been the internet or the rise of Dubai or, the dot-com boom and bust or, crypto. Picking trends has been something that I've been pretty good at. And so when I saw this, it was January that I started to first becoming concerned. And the roundtable actually, like many times in the last many years, the roundtable was sort of ahead of the curve. That's when I first started. That's one reason I started becoming so concerned. Balaji was going to attend, and he decided not to attend because he was worried about the risks. And there was 4 or 5 people from China who couldn't come. And I said, oh boy, this is pretty serious. They're not really able to travel. And so I was watching it, 3 weeks, 4 weeks before the roundtable in January, way before there was travel restrictions and this kind of thing. And then, I became concerned myself. I said, I'm going to stop traveling. I'm going to go to the roundtable because I'm the host, but I'm going to kind of cut down. And so there was a lot of people who are, because of mining and everything else, there's a lot of people who are familiar with China. And so I talked to a lot of them at the roundtable. And I remember I had a conversation with Rodolfo Novak, and he was talking about at the roundtable, and he was talking about supply chains. And he was like, you don't get it. There's this and there's this and there's this. And and I kind of knew some of this stuff intuitively, and I knew supply chain was a big deal. But when he was talking about how kind of every downstream electronics producer and everything else is shortage of supplies, I took that pretty seriously. So that's when I first really started taking it seriously. And then the minute I got home, I almost went home early, but the minute I got home, I just went into full overdrive mode of business preparedness, personal preparedness, and started writing and talking about it.
Become an early adopter. Siteship.ai.
And I suppose as well, this whole situation is leading to some interesting dynamics on a global scale. I think one that I've seen you talk about quite a bit is kind of government overreach, and how, people are starting to become a bit concerned about that. Do you think that cryptos will have a chance to protect people from that?
Yeah, I think so. We're in a really weird world right now. We're in an authoritarian state in the United States. We can say it's temporary or it's for a good reason or whatever. All authoritarian states have always said it's for a good reason. It's for your own protection. And so we can't just get lulled into complacency. It's only for a few months, or in Cuomo's case in New York, he's talking 9 months or a year. This is serious stuff. And you can never give up these kind of freedoms to government, because they're very, very difficult to get back. So there's certain things that you have to draw a line in. Government just should not be able to do. And ideally, we would do, in a perfect world, we'd do all of this voluntarily. But, governments around the world do use this kind of thing as an opportunity to cut down. And even private industries had YouTube yesterday saying that they're going to censor people for contradicting the WHO, which is just crazy because the WHO is a political organization. So you really got to watch this kind of thing. But I'm more concerned about biosurveillance, tracking, using these things to put limits on free speech, limits on assembly. Facebook is deleting groups who want to do protests because they're saying protests are against the recommendations of the health recommendation. And that's the slippery slope. That's the issue. health is a great way for authoritarians to have a way in. So if you have something like biosurveillance, say, hey, we need to track everybody to make sure that they're safe, to make sure they're not spreading the germs. This is important. Let's track them. Okay, yeah, that I'm not quite sure, but maybe you could say that's good now. That's not the problem. The problem is tomorrow or a year from tomorrow when some total evil authoritarian takes control of that. Because whenever you have power, it's not going to be some well-meaning doctor. It's not your family doctor who's going to be, running this biosurveillance. Or maybe if it is, he or she may do it for a year. The problem is when you have authoritarians take it over and a politician gets in control. Because whoever controls those databases and whoever controls that kind of thing controls the people. So you really got to avoid these things like biosurveillance and heavy-handed methods of controlling people and that kind of thing. The good news and the counter to this is because of technologies like crypto and decentralization, there's new tools that we have to fight this authoritarianism. Just like when the first printing presses allowed activists, the earliest activists in the world, some of the first stuff that was ever printed was activism, and it was against the government or against the church. So, in this world now, data is everything. Whoever has this biosurveillance, who knows where your phone is. I mean, think about what Amazon knows about you. It's unbelievable. I mean, they know, Amazon right now, they know where I am. I don't tell people where I am. They know where I am. They know every single thing that I've ordered. They know when I ordered it. They know how I paid for it. They know anybody I've ever sent gifts to, how it's all related. They even know what I watch in my spare time. And they can tell from that what mood I'm in. Oh, is Bruce watching a comedy? Oh, yeah, I see he ordered a bunch of stuff yesterday. Yeah, he's probably eating that cake he ordered. I mean, it's unbelievable how much they know. So data is everything right now. Like the old days, you'd have like the company store and they'd grab people and make them work in the factories. Amazon's not doing that. Amazon is just controlling your data. Same with Google, same with Facebook. So we've got to fight that by controlling our own data. And the best way to do that is decentralization and encryption, which is right in line with crypto and also cryptocurrencies, controlling your own money so that they can't say what to do.
And I guess even passports, wasn't that a wartime measure?
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know about that, but that sounds right. Yeah, and now we see changes. I heard somebody say the other day, this is incredible. They said they flew from, I don't remember which countries. I think it was Taiwan to Belfast or something. And they said they didn't need to present their passport. There's a new system in place where they were just able to walk through and
wow.
the facial recognition. That sounds, I'm not even sure that's true, but it seems, at least it's a claim. I mean, and if it's not true, it's probably true in small, limited places, but that's the direction we're going. They have a great deal of ability to know who's who and who's where through your phones. And they even have gait analysis. Apparently the way you walk is very unique, almost as unique as your fingerprint or your eyes. So they can have a machine that just, sees me walk through an airport and they know it's me. Well, once they have that gate, well, now they're back to that other database. They have all my Amazon records. They know what kind of mood I'm in. They know what movie I watched last night. And they have every single email I ever sent on Google and they know everything. So, and especially for big government agencies, most of these groups like Facebook, YouTube, I think Apple's pretty strict about it, but a lot of the others, they'll just share the stuff if the government asks. So you could have somebody who doesn't, maybe they just don't like me. Maybe they don't like my video or don't like that I appeared on your show. And they may say, yeah, I see it. We've analyzed his gate. That's Fenton. What's he up to? Who's he been emailing? And a lot of times these tech companies will share that stuff voluntarily without even having a warrant. There may not even be a reason. It might be somebody's, ex or something that they're in a dispute with. And that stuff can be very easily abused. And I'm not even worried about that one-off person. I'm worried about the actual evil person who doesn't seem evil really getting, mass control of this and using it to exercise authority over people.
And I guess we know that from Snowden and others that, these government agencies, they have tons of consultants, they have access to much more data than they should. And yeah, sometimes they wonder like, what is my ex-girlfriend up to? Or my competitor, I wonder what they're up to. So, you have a peek.
And authoritarians will just make up rules. They'll just say, like this YouTube person, it was quite concerning. I think it was the CEO of YouTube, but yeah. She was on yesterday. It's been cycled a lot because she said these concerning comments about saying, well, if somebody goes against the WHO, the WHO. We're going to delete that. And right before that, she said in kind of a very dismissive way, she says, somebody out there, promoting turmeric or vitamin C as a cure clearly will be banned. She said it in such an arrogant way. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Who the heck are you to decide? What, are you a doctor? You're going to decide? I mean, yes, I personally agree that vitamin C is not a cure for this very, very, very nasty disease. I do think there's exaggerations and there's different data and everything, but clearly this is a real thing that does kill people. And clearly it's not as simple as just take some vitamin C and it cures it. But that's not her business to decide. That's not her business to say. For one thing, crazy things can be true. I don't know that, and she doesn't know that. The way to do it is a double-blind, peer-reviewed scientific experiment. And then you can say, I don't agree with the scientist, or I do. And you could have some scammy scientist who says, look, you take one pill of this lifesaver vitamin C and you're done. And you argue the science. That's how truth is found. And truth is really important these days. Media lies outright. Social media is censoring like crazy. People don't know what's true. Finding truth is very, very important in times of crisis. And it's unfortunate that both governments and private industry are interfering with that.
If you're enjoying this episode, don't forget to sign up to our newsletter at shitcoin.com/newsletter.
I know as well, you mentioned to us just for the show that you've been working on a report, right?
Yes.
I haven't had a chance to read it, but we will definitely leave it below, links below. But yeah, what's the report about?
It was released. We were started on the hour, and the release was started to go on the hour at the same time. I usually have them go 7 minutes after, so you only would have had negative 7 minutes to read it. So,
and you said it's
but it
epic.
did come out today, and the title is "End of an Epoch." And it's a longer report than usual. It's more than your kind of Medium article sort of thing. I think it's more comprehensive. It talks about really helping people grasp the understanding of where we are and how we got here and the magnitude of this change. What it is all about. There's one of the main concepts is that generations change. So every 30 years or so, you have a new generation. You have the silent generation and the greatest generation who fought in World War II. And then you have the baby boomers who built the world we see today. And we have Generation X and millennials. Each one is different. About every 100 years, you have one that's really different. And that's called a fourth turning. And there's a book by Strauss and Howe, which I mentioned in the report. So a fourth turning is when you see big changes. You see World War I, you see the Industrial Revolution, these kind of things. Well, about every 4 of those, you have a cataclysmic change, an epoch shift. The whole world changes. The birth of Christianity, the birth of Islam, the rise of the Roman Empire, the fall of the Roman Empire, the Dark Ages. These kind of things are very, very, very significant, and they seem unusual to us. None of us have a frame of reference for what's happening now. But this kind of cataclysmic change is actually the norm. It's inevitable. And usually when this has happened, in the many, many times in history it happens very fast and very permanently. And the new world is unrecognizable from the old world. So if you look at, 1890 to 1910, a 20-year period, completely different. People who had never seen a car, and then somebody born in 1900 never even saw a car, didn't have a phone, 70% chance they lived on a farm. And then 1919, they've got airplanes flying overhead in the fields of France, and they're getting mustard gas. I mean, it would be like us, in 2024, we're fighting, aliens with space lasers or something. It's massive, massive change. The way the world works, governments, what money is, who's in power, all of these kind of things, completely torn down and completely rebuilt. That, I believe, is what we're going on now. At the very, very least, it is clearly a fourth turning at the least. I think it's bigger than that. I think it's an epoch shift that I really believe might be on the level of the Renaissance or the Industrial Revolution or something like that, the creation of America, the French Revolution, these kind of massive, massive events that completely change and transform our world and make everything we knew unrecognizable. Everything that we thought we knew and everything we learned in our lives is now, kind of irrelevant. And I think that's just starting now, last month, this month, probably take a year or so at least to shake out and see how this world works and what happens. But it is a very, very big deal. And that's kind of the core themes of the report, and I go into a lot more depth in it.
Yeah, because I mean, the phrase "return to normal," people started using that quite early, but unless you got a time machine, that's not going to happen. What do you think will be the new normal?
Well, that is profound. It is profound because we won't, you're absolutely right. We won't return to the old way. There will be a new normal, but it's a completely new thing. It's like, oh, I woke up in my house with my job, and then I woke up in a different house across the country with a different job. It's a new normal, but you're in a different house, different job, maybe different country. It depends how different this is going to be, but it will be very, very, very different. You have just, millions of businesses wiped out and new businesses, jobs, consumer behaviors have changed forever. People have changed. You don't even need to ask anybody. If you ask everybody you know, say, has this changed you at all? Yeah, of course it's changed you. Some people it's changed completely. It's changed their whole personality. There's people who quit what they're doing. They're going to do something completely different. They may become the next great novelist, or they may become a nut. Who knows what's going to happen. But on a macro level, it's going to change institutions and how money works and how governments work and what our borders are and all kinds of things. We may see also lots of secondary and nth order effects, like potentially wars and other things like that come out of this. So the good news is that it will pass. Hopefully it won't be a real long time. I think it'll be at least a year, but might be a few years. The good news is that already we've had such a drop, and we may have more. The rebuilding process will be an upward climb. There will be years of growth once the dust settles and things are rebuilt. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be destroyed, businesses, anything that was weak, some things that were strong, just collateral damage. A lot of stuff will be destroyed by this, but ultimately some new things will be rebuilt, new industries, just like in the Great Depression. The modern movie business came out of the Great Depression, and now some new form of entertainment, VR or other things, will probably be strengthened by this. Just the ability for us to talk like this over distance. This would have been a technological massive hurdle just 3 years ago. 3 years ago, this would have, I remember Zoom links even 2 years ago were a big pain. Was it even around 2 years ago? It's only been around a little while, and just sort of talking through Skype even is sort of, just four years ago was a real hard thing. So now you have everybody doing it, and so things change quite a bit. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's just the beginning of how different things are. I did go into the report talking about what the job market might look like in different technologies and industries, entertainment and tech and sports and gold and silver and distressed real estate and all of these other things that may come out of this. But the main thing is that we don't know, but it's going to be real different.
There's two numbers that I've been very curious about. The results won't be in for a while, but how many births and how many divorces? What do you think on that one?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there will be a huge spike 9 months from March. So right around the end of the year, January, you're going to see a huge spike. But that may only be a 1 or 2 or 3 month thing. I don't think there will be a huge spike from May. So it would be an anomaly. I study demographics a lot, and you have these big generations that have kids, and it's general life planning kind of thing. You do have these interesting spikes, even when there's a blackout or a snowstorm. Exactly 9 months later, you have babies born. So this will be similar to like a huge blackout. I think you'll have a huge spike. People right when they got into quarantine, unplanned babies. That's the thing that happens. But right now, if you were going to just have a baby without a plan, you probably would have done it in the last month and a half. Right now, more people are saying, well, wait a minute, what's going on? What's going on with the world? Do we really want to have a baby? And these decisions will be harder as you have more layoffs and things. People who are laid off don't plan children generally. So I think that you'll have this little, rapid, huge spike for a couple months, and then you'll probably have a drop for a while until this shakes out. And here's an interesting thing. As this changes, everything changes. You know, look at the changes we've already seen in our lives. We haven't been through a fourth turning. We haven't been through an epoch shift. Yet we've seen people go from rural to cities, and now they're kind of back to rural and hybrids again. I've seen totally different ways that you know, I talk about how when I started my career, commission-based jobs were just kind of dying out. It was sort of like, commission, maybe a little base, and then within a couple of years, it was base plus commission, and then you know, last year there's almost no commission jobs. Well, that's just normal shifts in a normal career. We're talking about an epoch shift. We're talking about a fourth turning where everything changes. So how people think right now, the average person gets married at around 20, I think it's 24, and they have a kid at around 26. You can find the exact numbers. It might I think it might be it's either the birth or the marriage age, but they have it pinned down to like the month, because demographics are so predictable. When you take millions and millions of people, you can say, yes, it's 26.2 is the average age. Well, that can completely change. When people change because of this, you could just have people everybody changes. And we don't know what that will happen. Maybe Gen Z, this experience says, whoa, I need stability. I'm going to get married now. We may see marriage age drop from 26 to 20. You know, it's been 18 and younger than that in history. Maybe people will do it, or maybe they'll do something else. Maybe their reaction to this will be, you know, oh boy, I was stuck in that quarantine so long. I want to go out and date more, and I don't want to tie down. You know, who knows how people will react? You know, we live in a really cool town, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is kind of like a small city, very touristy, very cool. Millennials and Gen Z love it because it's fun, and there's art and nightclubs, or not nightclubs, but bars and things like that. We don't know what that will be. You know, will people still think that's cool? Maybe, you know, rural areas, suburbs were dying in the United States. Maybe they'll make a comeback. You know, all the baby boomers were in suburbs. And when I grew up in high school, it was like, that's what you did when you're upper middle class. Your family got a little house on a cul-de-sac. And the millennials and Gen Z didn't want any part of cul-de-sacs. You couldn't practically give those houses away. They're going for the same price they went for 15, 20 years earlier when everything else is booming. Well, that could change. We just don't know. You could see communes come back. You could see people, you know, moving together, different, you know, all kinds of different ways of living styles and things like that. So that's what you want to watch for from a personal and especially a business standpoint. Watch for what these trends are. See what the Gen Z does, and the millennials and the baby boomers. You know, see what they do. If there's a mass movement of baby boomers moving in with their millennial kids, or you see a mass movement of super young people moving from the cities to the country, you know, watch those trends, because those trends are going to be way more massive than anything we've seen before. And if you look at the Depression and especially other epoch shifts and other fourth turnings, this change happens fast. Whatever people like is what they're going to do, and it's going to completely change the world, and all the old things are going to be completely destroyed.
Oh man, there's a lot to think about there, isn't there? I think I definitely will be sure to read that report as soon as we're finished.
Great.
We'll leave in the show notes as well, right at the top for you guys. It's brucefenton.com/economic-report. Bruce, where can everyone keep up to date with what you're up to?
That website is good, brucefenton.com. I need to get better about updating it and everything. I guess that's one excuse about quarantine. You know, you get to a lot of these projects you meant to do. So that's something that I want to do, but that has a lot of, I'm going to try and do, this report was larger, but I'm going to try and do shorter versions of this more often. And I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, Bruce Fenton, and pretty easy to find, but I try and post a lot on Twitter, and I'm going to try and do more YouTube and that kind of thing. So I'm pretty easy to find, and I'm certainly no shortage of sharing my opinions for whatever they're worth.